Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, getting you ready for opening day because it is finally here. Oh my goodness. You can see in the episode headline, it's been a no good, very bad offseason from a PR standpoint, from just kind of the Twins roster in general. We'll get to all of that in a second, but there was through all the offseason, it was like, let's just get to the next thing. If it was in the middle of the offseason, it's let's just get to spring training. And once you're in spring training, of course, then everybody gets a little bit bored with that. And it's like, let's just get to opening day. And we are finally here. Of course, in Minnesota, it doesn't quite look like that due to the foot dumping of snow, foot plus, depending on where you live. But it is baseball weather down in Kansas City, and that's where the Minnesota Twins are going to play today, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun, I hope. Here we go. Okay, so we have a lot to catch up on. First of all, I want to apologize for not having a ton of content out in the off season. Just been busy with a lot of things. My 9-to-5 job is working at a radio station, did a lot of traveling for state and section playoff boys and girls basketball. I've been doing some speech coaching for my old high school. That's been really, really fun to get to do. And a couple other things just in my personal life have just kind of kept me from getting out here and putting out podcasts as much as I wanted to. Now, of course, I wasn't going to put out podcasts like every week during the off season because, last year I could have justified it because the Twins were doing stuff all the time. This off season, not so much. So that being said, we got a lot to catch up on, so let's kind of bang through a few of these things. I know, of course, that some of these have already been talked about to death, but I feel like I got to say my piece on them, then I can move on. The good news is I don't have to be super in-depth on some of these, and I can just kind of give you my gist and my feelings on it and move on. So here we go. Of course, the big news of the offseason was the Twins' TV and payroll situation. It was speculated, are the Twins going to go to MLB.TV? Is some other provider going to swoop in and pick up the Twins? Are the Twins going to go back to Bally? And it felt like for the longest time, the Minnesota Twins did not want to go to Bally, and they tried everything they could, it felt like, to not go there. And in the end, they had to go in with Bally for one more year, kicking and screaming because Bally got bought out, got saved. There was a reinvestment of like $160 million by Jeff Bezos and Amazon to try and reinvigorate Bally Sports, because here's the short story. Bally Sports was going bankrupt. They were going to cease operations at the end of 2024. Amazon came in and gave them a bunch of money to keep them running, because Amazon, with Amazon Prime, they have Thursday Night Football, but Amazon wants to do more. They want to get in to other leagues, and instead of paying a bunch of money for primetime, they could take over the RSN, which stands for Regional Sports and Network. They could, and it's not just for the Twins, by the way. It's for the Wolves, the Wild, and not just for Minnesota sports, but for 20 different markets. I think 16 different markets across pro sports, which is over half of the league. It's over half of teams in each league. So it's enticing for Amazon to want to get into that game. And I think Major League Baseball wants Amazon to get into that game because they know that Amazon has some deep pockets. But Amazon doesn't have the infrastructure for that. And if you're Amazon, what is easier? Is it easier to build up your own infrastructure from scratch? Or is it, let's put $158 million to buy a stake in Bally Sports, and we keep giving more and more money to them and get more and more control over the company and slowly take it over and slowly have their foot in that thing, and they don't have to build it up from scratch. It's already there. The equipment, the employees, everything is there. They just need to take it over. They feel like if they put their money in and they manage it correctly and they do X, Y, and Z, that they'll be in a better spot. So that is why Bally got put with all this money. And because Bally had enough money, that meant that the Twins had realistically no other choice but to go back to Bally. I think the Twins did not foresee Bally coming in with an offer like that. They did not foresee or Amazon coming in with an offer for Bally. They definitely saw themselves probably going to MLB.TV for a year. And because they thought that they could do that, they thought that they could tell everybody how open that they were going to be. And Corey Provis now got hung out to dry because, as we talked about on the podcast when Corey Provis got hired, that he said no blackouts. No blackouts are going to be a thing. Everybody's going to be able to watch, but It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia when Corey Provis says there will be no blackouts in 2024, and then just goes, there will be blackouts. There were blackouts in 2024. That's what it's like for him, and no fault of Provis, by the way. Like, that guy definitely was told that. I think that the Twins were telling him the truth at the time, and things changed in a hurry, and it just makes everybody have egg on their face at the end, which is always why people say, typically, it's an ongoing not investigation, but it's an ongoing negotiation, and we can't comment until things are done. You say things like that to kind of protect yourself, not to hide anything, but just to prevent yourself from doing a situation like that where you overpromise and underdeliver. And that's what the Twins did in that situation. The Twins, from a organizational standpoint, had a very bad public relations offseason, a horrible public relations offseason. They're going to be a good team this year, so it's going to make up for it. But things did not go their way from a public relations standpoint. And anyway, so the Twins had to go back to Bally kicking and screaming. Now, the Twins put out early in the offseason that they were going to cut payroll because the TV deal was gone, and they're not going to have that money, and they're going to need to cut payroll by $30 million. Now, the Twins TV deal was about, they won't, of course, say, because according to the bankruptcy courts, they are keeping those numbers hidden from the general public, which is just the Twins' way of saying, don't look at how much money we actually made, because if you see that number and see that we're cutting payroll by that much, you're going to be very upset, because the Twins definitely, the Twins could have spent more money this offseason. And obviously, and it hurt their roster development. Obviously, it hurt the way that they put this roster together because of their lack of payroll and because of their unwillingness to invest in this ball club. And everybody else has said it to death, so you've already heard it. This team is coming off of a 2-decade-long postseason drought that was just snapped. They have Pablo Lopez, there's Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton, you have young stars and Royce Lewis, Matt Wallner, Ed Julian, Brooks Lee on the way. Like, there is legit excitement with this team. And instead of building off that, not by, going and signing Blake Snell, I'm not saying the Twins need to go and make the biggest free agent signing possible, but the Twins didn't have a chance to go get a bunch of guys who could have helped this team. Now, not just in free agency, but if you're going to make a trade, you can't make a trade if this guy is this much salary and this guy is that much salary. And, they signed Carlos Santana. He'll be a nice player for them. Could you maybe sign a guy who's one step above Carlos Santana? It's all these things like that, because the Twins wanted to cut money. And from a business standpoint, I understand. And the Twins were, the Twins are not a top market team. I get that. I'm not saying the Twins, there is a standpoint of, there's a price point for everything. I get it. I understand that notion, but also I understand that you just, from a PR standpoint, botched this entire thing if you're Twins ownership. And now we're ready to try and see how things end up working out, because this is going to be an interesting season from that standpoint. But ownership, look, I could rail against ownership all day, but at the end of the day, I don't want that to be my entire thing. Like, I've seen people spend their entire offseason railing on it and whatever, and I get it. You totally have the right to be frustrated. You totally have the right to be upset. But here we go. This is the thing on the ground. And it did hamper the Twins roster development for the Twins standpoint, because they couldn't get those guys. Instead, the big move of the offseason was trading away Jorge Polanco, who is your starting second baseman and a big part of your team. Now, I understand why Jorge Polanco was traded. And honestly, I think even if the Twins weren't cutting payroll, I think they still would have traded Polanco, because you have Ed Julian, you have Brooks Lee, you have this plethora of prospects in your system that are infield prospects, and you have nowhere to put them. Jorge Polanco's on the last year of his deal. The injuries have started to wear on him after being an Ironman for the front half of his career. He started to miss more and more games. I get it. But when you look at the return in the Jorge Polanco trade, it's fascinating, because the Twins built this trade around trying to give them some flexibility, because before the Jorge Polanco trade, the Twins were at the max of their payroll without signing anybody, relatively speaking. So they got Anthony DeSclafani, and we'll get to him in a second. They got Justin Topa. We'll get to him in a second. They got a top 100 prospect in Gabriel Gonzalez. He's a low minors top 100 prospect, but a top 100 prospect. They got Darren Bowen, another kind of pitching prospect as a throw-in, and they got cash considerations, which allowed the Twins to get just enough money to sign Carlos Santana. And that was pretty much the Twins offseason. If you look at the transaction list for the Twins, it wasn't much. Like they traded for Steven Okert in exchange for Nick Gordon. They did do that to get another bullpen arm. They signed Jay Jackson. They signed Josh Stamont. But those are all low-level bullpen signings. It wasn't, any kind of big moves. And I'm not saying they need to have big-level bullpen signings, but that's really what it was. They traded for Manuel Margot, and we'll get to all that in a second. But I don't know, man. Like, it just felt like a very underwhelming offseason, and fans feel that. I was heartbroken when the Twins lost and were eliminated from the playoffs. I legit couldn't even look at Twin stuff for a few days just because it was it felt like that was the team of destiny and it fell short. And then once I got into offseason mode, I'm like, okay, here we go. How can this team build on it? And they just weren't able to because Anthony DeSclafani has an elbow issue and there's a chance he doesn't pitch at all for the Minnesota Twins. Now, DeSclafani was not the main piece of that trade. He was a piece to try and get a fifth starter. And now Louis Varland bumps in as your fifth starter, which is fine. I like Louis Varland. Louis Varland should have been the fifth starter probably regardless. But remember last year, the Twins in that opening day rotation had Pablo Lopez. They had Sonny Gray. They had Joe Ryan. They had Tyler Mahle, and they had Kenta Maeda. They lost Tyler Mahle almost immediately. They lost Kenta Maeda to the IL for about a month and a half early on. So Ober and Varland went back up right away. But even with those two, they still needed to bring in Dallas Keuchel to pitch a lot of games for this team. They still needed Brent Hedrick to come in and make some starts every once in a while. The Twins used about 8 starting pitchers throughout the season. So if you're the Twins, the starting 5 they have now is really good. According to Fangraphs, the Twins are going to have the number 5 starting rotation in all of baseball, according to their projections. It's going to be a nice rotation if everybody stays healthy, but they're pitchers and it's a long season. And of course, insert your Minnesota Twins joke here, it's the Minnesota Twins. You just have to assume that you are going to need to use more than those 5 guys. And that's where we start to get murky. That's where DeSclafani could have made a few starts and at least gotten you a little bit into the season before you needed to call up Varland or whatever. And now we'll see, because there's David Festa, who's a pitching prospect who could be a nice addition for the Twins, but he's never made a major league start yet. How much production do you want to bank from a rookie starting pitcher? You have Brent Hedrick, who again can make some starts. He can fill that Dallas Keuchel role of just every 5th day we need a guy who can get us 5 innings and move on. Sure. You have Simeon Woods Richardson, who did not have a great 2023, but maybe he has a bounce back year and figures it out. And again, can just be that 5 and dive guy. Can you at least get us 5 innings every 5 days? And Pablo and Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober can go 6 to 7 and kind of smooth some things out on that end. Sure. But that's Anthony DeSclafani. That one almost gone. Now, Anthony DeSclafani was a throw-in because he was on the Giants roster at the beginning of the offseason, got traded to the Mariners as a throw-in. We'll take him off your hands. And the Twins said, hey, we'll take him off your hands as well because we need an extra starting pitcher, but you got to pay half his salary. So the Twins aren't really paying DeSclafani's full salary. The Mariners are paying a bunch of it, which was the cash considerations, which allowed the Twins to free up some salary space. That's kind of how things worked out. Justin Topa is the other piece in that trade. And Justin Topa had a really, really good year last year, a career year. And the Twins want an extra arm in the bullpen. He has a chance at his ceiling to be a nice setup man. His floor would be a 6th, 7th inning guy. So if you're the Twins, that piece is nice. Now, of course, he got hurt, but that's a freak injury. He got it trying to back up home plate during a spring training game. There's nothing you can do about that. There's no, the Twins only trade for damaged goods kind of narrative, which I just don't buy into, because every starting pitcher, every reliever, every pitcher you trade for, a prospect, a veteran, they're always going to have arm issues, and they're more likely than not going to need Tommy John surgery at some point in their careers. You look at Chris Paddock, he needed Tommy John surgery. Now, he did have some concerns trading for him. It's why a deal with the Mets fell through for Paddock. But now he's on the other end of that Tommy John surgery, and he looks to be a nice addition to this Twins rotation. The opening day rotation is I think they've announced the order. It's Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, Chris Paddock, and Louis Varland. Maybe I think they swapped around Varland and Paddock. But that's where things look for the Twins to start on opening day. So for for Topa, he's going to miss some time. So the thing is that was, even though I get it, and obviously it's nobody's fault, but looking at the Twins, they weren't able to do much in the offseason, and their main roster shakeup to improve the team was trading Jorge Polanco for those guys. And Bowen and Gonzalez are both prospects. They're not going to sniff the Twins this season. But the two guys who had to help the team this year aren't going to help the team right away. Now, Topa, I think, wanted to pitch through it, and the Twins were like, you know what? We don't need you to like aggravate it more. Just take a couple weeks off and be back for the rest of the season. So I'm not worried about Justin Topa. I think he'll be a nice piece for this bullpen. And the Twins bullpen, before the Duran injury, and we'll get to that in a second, was projected to be one of the top in the league. And bullpens are tough to predict because they're like kickers in the NFL. Some years they're the most dominant thing you've ever seen, and the next year they can't do anything right. It's like a kicker. Like, they're just fluky. And you can never quite predict them from one season to the next and whatnot. But with that big move for getting Polanco, it kind of fell on its face. And with the Twins trading for damaged goods, that narrative, I don't believe it. And here's why. I don't believe it because every pitcher you trade for has risk. Every pitcher you sign has risk. Look at the Texas Rangers. They signed Jacob deGrom to a massive, massive contract. And he barely pitched for them last year. He was of no impact to the Texas Rangers team that won the World Series. But he was of no impact to them. And he probably won't be an impact to them this year. I'm going to be honest. Like, Jacob deGrom is a phenomenal pitcher. He just cannot stay healthy. You look at the New York Yankees. Remember, everybody wanted to trade for Frankie Montas in 2022. I wanted to trade for Frankie Montas in 2022. And then the Yankees did. He made like 3 starts, was hurt, didn't really pitch well, did not pitch well at the beginning of 2023, and needed Tommy John surgery. And to the point where he signed like a 1-year prove-it deal. I can't remember where he went, but he may... It's going to kill me wherever he went. I'll look it up in a second. But you get my point. Is not every team has to deal with this issue of trading for a guy or acquiring a guy and then having him get hurt. That is something that every team has to get. Now, if you want to say the Twins are more often than not, I would say you can make that case, but you're going to need proof. And it's not just listing Twins players that get hurt. You're going to need to show from around baseball, because and I get it. Like, not every fan has time to follow every single team. I'm not saying like, you just got to be a better fan. Like, it's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say you're looking at it from like a 100-foot view, and you need to look at it from like a 30,000-foot view when you talk about the Twins are one of the worst teams at doing X. When you say that, you need to look at other teams if you want to realistically make that claim. That's all I'm saying. But if you feel differently, drop it in the comments. Let me know. Or just have any thoughts on the season, drop them down as we get ready for the opening day. Depending on when you're listening to this, I'm broadcasting live from my house on the morning of opening day, and we'll see how things go. I do have an announcement coming up towards the end of the podcast that I'm really, really excited about, so stick around for that. But looking towards opening day, the Twins also brought in Carlos Santana, who I think will be a nice bat for them. Obviously, Carlos Santana is a pro's pro. Falvey knows him from his days in Cleveland, and he's been a Twin killer for years. So it's always fun when a Twin killer gets to put on the uniform for your team. You look at a guy like Jim Thome, was always that way. It's like, Jim Thome's on our team? Awesome. Now, Carlos Santana isn't quite to the status of Jim Thome as a, walk-in. Carlos Santana's had a nice career, don't get me wrong. But Jim Thome's like a first ballot automatic Hall of Famer who's hit over 600 home runs. So like, there's obviously a difference there, but it's kind of the same gist of that guy killed us and now he's on our team. Sweet. And that's the thing for Carlos Santana. Now, he's not what he once was, but he's still a guy that's going to hit for a high average, and he's going to play a nice first base, and he's going to be a veteran and take good at-bats throughout the lineup. The Twins need a guy like that, so that helps out. It's, like a B. It's a nice signing, but it's not an over-the-top thing. It's 1 year, $8 million. There could have been other guys you could have brought in, and I don't necessarily blame the Twins, or Twins fans, I should say, for feeling like there could have been more done this offseason, because that's pretty much it. The Twins brought in a flurry of bullpen guys, but bullpen guys that we talked about are fluky, so it's hard to get super excited about any addition. When you look at the Twins trading for Steven Okert, Nick Gordon was the return package to Miami, and good for Nick Gordon. They needed infield help. Nick Gordon can be a utility guy. He can play corner outfield. Arise is going to play second base. I know Jazz Chisholm will play center field, and you have Tim Anderson playing shortstop, but Nick Gordon's the backup for all three. So Nick Gordon's going to find himself a lot more playing time than he would with the Twins, because the Twins, their infield spots are full. And if you look at the backup center field options, obviously this was before Margot, but you had, before they got Margot, but you have Willie Castro, you have Austin Martin, you have just enough guys in your system that can kind of do it. And this is Nick Gordon's last year of, I think, team control. And also he doesn't have any more options left. I don't think the Twins could have put him in St. Paul if he didn't make the roster. If he struggled, they would have to put him on waivers. So the Twins basically are like, let's trade him while he's got some kind of value. And in return, you get a nice bullpen arm in Stephen O'Kurt. He's not a high leverage guy, but he's a lefty. And the Twins are going to need lefties because their bullpen guys got hurt. And again, we'll get to that in a second as we recap the offseason here. But I want to recap of basically as we kind of work our way up. I think the only thing that's left really is Manuel Margot. And I know people didn't like maybe the return package that the Twins gave up because they traded Noah Miller. And Noah Miller is a nice glove first, contact first prospect. The Twins have a ton of shortstop prospects. If you look at Brooks Lee, if you look at Royce Lewis, they still have Carlos Correa. Noah Miller's probably a nice prospect. I don't think he had a super high ceiling. Now, it's not to say he can't be a nice major league player, but just with everything, I think in the end with the Twins and this Margot signing, first with Margot. Manuel Margot is a speedy guy who can steal a lot of bases. He's basically the Michael A. Taylor replacement of a guy who can back up center field in a pinch. And also you can put him in the lineup for a week or a month or whatever and feel comfortable starting him. It's not where you had to throw Gilberto Celestino out there. And no disrespect to Celestino, but he's kind of been picked on this podcast as like our example. But you have a legitimate person you can put in as a center fielder and feel comfortable about that. And when you look at Rocco Baldelli, who was a center fielder, that's got to mean something to have a center fielder you trust out there and a guy who's proven to play the position. So Manuel Margot can do that. Margot can also platoon with Wallner as a lefty righty because Margot a righty. Wallner a lefty, and that means Margot can hit lefties a little bit better. His OPS against lefties wasn't great this season, or I should say in 2023. In 2022, he had an OPS of like 850 against lefties. So if you can get anywhere close to that, or even just above 750 OPS against lefties and play a decent corner outfield and center field at times, I think that's what the Twins need. And this gets us to spring training. The big story of spring training is, thank goodness, Byron Buxton can finally play center field. I was one of those people last year who said, like, look, if Buxton's not ready to play center field, don't put him out there just to put him out there. I was not one of those people that was consternating on social media about Buxton not playing center field. I get the frustration, but that just wasn't the thing that wasn't the hill I was going to die on with that. But Byron Buxton came into camp feeling healthy. I wasn't down there, obviously, but from reading articles, hearing people talk about Buxton, who did get to see Buxton down there and talk with him, it's the most confident he's felt in years. All that's good stuff. It's all best shape of his life, platitudes. I understand that. And it all does mean stuff for that time. Because Buxton, you look at, he ran to third on a triple, and it looked like he was just coasting. Like he was just kind of fast walking, and all of a sudden he's on third base. If he would have tried to run, he would have been standing up at home plate. Like, that's the crazy part. Byron Buxton, that guy only plays one way, and it's like 100%, because outside of that, there was a play where he's like diving for a ball in center field. And Byron Buxton, again, when healthy, and I'm not going to sit here and say, if Byron Buxton can this year all of a sudden play 130 games, can Buxton play 90 games? Can he play 100 games? If he can get towards that range, then the Twins are going to be really, really good, because the Twins record with Byron Buxton compared to without is just, the Twins are an under 500 team compared to a 90 win ball club when Byron Buxton is in the lineup. He is impactful to a baseball team, his presence. And that's the thing. I know the Twins didn't have a great hitting year to start, and the Twins didn't get a free agent. And I made this case early in the offseason. I wrote an article about it for Zone Coverage. A healthy Buxton and a healthy Correa, and both players seem to be healthy. Those two coming into the season and bouncing back to their career averages would feed families. Like, that is your offseason addition. The Twins needed to get additions to help them hit better against lefties in the lineup. Well, if Byron Buxton and Carlos Correa, both righties, can get close to their career averages, there is your improvement from a year ago against lefties. Both those guys did not have good seasons, typically speaking. Carlos Correa heated up toward the end like he always does. Carlos Correa had a great postseason. But if you look at the season as a whole, Carlos Correa did not have a great year. But now if he has a bounce back year, if Buxton has a bounce back year, holy crap, you have that figured out. Now, you can't have if this guy does this and if this guy does that and if this guy, and if you go down the lineup and do all of that, you're probably in for a rough year if you have to justify everybody doing that. And you can look at it with the Twins rookies and say, well, if Royce Lewis stays healthy and has another and plays at the production he did last year, and if Matt Wallner can play at the production he did last year, and if Ed Julian can take a step up or at least play at that same level, and like you look at all this and you kind of run down the line, and all of a sudden you go, and it's what I did with the Twins last year. And when they struggled in the first half, it was kind of that, because I looked at the Twins and I said, and you can go back on the podcast a year ago and listen. And I said, this Twins team has a lot of great potential, but it doesn't really feel like they have a high floor. Like if things fall out, things could get ugly. And it did get ugly in the first half. Now that high ceiling showed itself in the second half when a lot of those rookies played. But the whole gist of this is to say that Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton feel healthy. Byron Buxton playing center field this year is going to be awesome. I don't know how long it'll last. I don't. Maybe he slides into the second base and he hurts his knee. I don't know. We all know that it's possible. Anytime Buxton dives, we all kind of hold our breath. And I get it. I get why a lot of people are ready to be out on Byron Buxton. But if you look at the salary, Buxton's making $10 million. Max Kepler's making the same amount of money as him. Like that, $10 million is not that much for Byron Buxton. Now, I get if he doesn't play a whole season, then it's $10 million wasted. And in a year when the payroll is tight, you can make that argument. But also at the end of the day, Buxton's not taking up Carlos Correa money. He's not Joe Mauer money. Like he's not taking up that part of the payroll. And that gets us to the other big point of the offseason, which is Joe Mauer making the Hall of Fame. I've wrote about it, talked about it. Joe Mauer's great. He's awesome. People who don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer are just being weirdos at this point. But it kind of gets me to the Joe Mauer thing of, everybody would look at the contract and they'd blame him. Don't blame him. Don't blame him for signing the contract. That's not his fault. You can't control injuries, and you can't control injuries with Buxton. If it was up to Buxton, he would play every single day. But whatever. I digress on that point. The whole thing is to say a healthy Buxton and a healthy Correa mean a lot to this team. Some other stories throughout the spring, before we get to kind of the injuries as we lead up to opening day, is the fact of that everything kind of felt set. Like the Twins are really having a quiet spring training up until the point where everybody got hurt. But the one intriguing storyline was Brooks Lee, because Brooks Lee immediately came into camp and Falvey and Levine were saying he's basically major league ready. I don't think they might have said major league ready, but they also might have just hedged ever so slightly. But they were like, you don't just come out as an organization and say that, because you have no incentive to do that, because he's buried right now behind Julian and Lewis and Correa at all three of the infield positions that he could play in the majors. And they came out and said he's a major leaguer. Like he is ready. He is ready. And now he got assigned to minor league camp. But, again, the Twins finished with the worst record in the Grapefruit League in spring training. That means jack. It does not mean anything. But now I'm going to turn around and say spring training does mean a little bit, in the sense of Brooks Lee was getting doubles off of Spencer Strider and Craig Kimbrell, established major league pitchers. Brooks Lee, I think the thing with Brooks Lee is he has a high floor and his ceiling isn't necessarily where you would put a top prospect. So his ceiling isn't Royce Lewis's ceiling, which is an MVP and a cornerstone and all that kind of stuff. Brooks Lee's ceiling is more of a very solid major league baseball player. It's not to say Brooks Lee can't become an all-star ever in his career, but he's not going to be like a multiple-time all-star who's, the face of a team. And he'll just be a nice player who hits maybe anywhere from 3 to 6 in your lineup, and maybe not 3 to 6, but you get my point. Like somebody who's in the top part of your lineup who can play who's a very nice defender. And, the thing with Brooks Lee is he has doubles power. And I think the next step is if he can ever get home run power to kind of aid with that, that'll help out. But really with Brooks Lee, I'm a big Brooks Lee guy. I know there are a lot of people, and I get the argument of saying the Twins should trade Brooks Lee because they already have Correa and you already have Lewis, and Julian's at second base. Why don't you just trade him? Because he's a shortstop prospect at the moment. And shortstop prospects are the highest prospect you can buy. And if you're the Twins and you want to get the best value you can, trade Brooks Lee now while he's still a shortstop in case he gets moved to second base and just takes over there. Do that so a team can trade for a shortstop prospect and you can get that high starting pick that the Twins all getting this winter, but never quite got. If they could, like, I understand the argument. It's a good argument. I'm just on the side of Brooks Lee is a really good prospect, and I don't know if I'm just willing to let him go because I think the high floor, even though the high ceiling isn't there, the high floor works out well for where the team is at right now. And depending on how you view Alex Kirilloff, if he doesn't have a good season this year, Alex Kirilloff is, not that he's getting cut, but he is out of the Twins' future plans as a cornerstone, as like a building block guy of this team. You slide Ed Julian over to first base, and all of a sudden Brooks Lee's at second. But could you imagine that infield of Ed Julian at first base, Brooks Lee at second, Correa at short, Lewis at third? The defense would just be great. And of course, the hitting as well. Like, that's a good outfield you can build on. You have Buxton in center. You have Wallner in left. Obviously, Kepler is in his final year of his contract in right. But you have Jeffers behind the plate. All of this stuff. So as we get ready for the season, the Twins had some injuries to the bullpen. Justin Topa is going to start the year on the IL. Caleb Thielbar is going to start the year on the IL. And the cherry on top is Yohan Duran is going to go on the IL. And man, it felt like the Twins had a horrible offseason from a PR standpoint. And especially when Joe Pohlad went out there and went on an interview with WCCO Radio at the beginning of spring training and, like, again, said what everybody knew, which was that we're not going to go after some of these free agents that were left in Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell, not Matt Chapman. Who was the other guy? Whatever. Maybe it was Matt Chapman. There was a few other guys who were out there that the Twins could have brought in, and they kind of said, we're not even going to attempt that. And a lot of people got mad. And I get it. I'm not saying you can't get mad, but it was a bad PR thing for the Twins to do. And of course, that set the discourse at the beginning of spring training and the Pohlads and the ownership and everything. And all of this has scuttled fan excitement for a year where there should be fan excitement. Even if you don't even take into the offseason, you look at building blocks like Royce Lewis, Matt Wallner, Ed Julian, Brooks Lee on the way. Pablo Lopez pitches for my favorite baseball team. He's pitching today. I'm so excited for that. I'm going to talk about Pablo Lopez at the end of the podcast. But when you look at all of that, it just doesn't quite, like, you still have excitement. And then you have that right before spring training to make everybody remember why they're mad at you. And then that happens. And then at the end of spring training, a quiet spring training where it feels like we're building up towards the regular season, all of these injuries happen to the bullpen. And of course, DeSclafani not going to be potentially not going to pitch all year, depending on how things go. And it goes back to the Twins are cheap because they wouldn't get anybody else. And Falvey only trades for damaged goods. And I'm not saying you can't believe that. I'm not saying that those opinions don't have some truth to them. I'm not trying to say that, but I'm just trying to say, like, from a fan standpoint, it's like, I just want to enjoy my favorite baseball team. And I got to sit here and have this exhausting debate instead of actually talking about baseball. So that's where I sit in this whole thing, which is why opening day finally getting here is good. There was a certain point last year at the end of the regular season when the Twins locked up the AL Central and everybody kind of got worried about X or got worried about Y. And I didn't say this on Twitter. I can't remember who did. Maybe it was Twins Centrals. Somebody like that said, we just need the playoffs to start, please. And I agree. Like, it was just like, we just need to get to the next thing because we're all just getting antsy here. And I think that's the same thing with the Minnesota Twins as they get ready for opening day. We just need opening day to get here. My goodness. Now, if the Twins somehow lose 2 out of 3 in Kansas City, there's going to be a lot of people that are freaking out, like DEFCON 4, something like that. I'm not going to go there, but still, I wouldn't be a DEFCON 4 or DEFCON 3. I'd be like maybe a DEFCON 8 or something like that. But we just need opening day to get here. But the Twins not having those arms, it helps that they have the bullpen depth. It really does, because Steven Okert and Cody Funderburk are going to make the opening day roster. They are going to start in place of or they're going to be in the bullpen in place of Thielbar, and they're going to take on that lefty role. Probably Funderburk, the first lefty out of the pen, but we'll see. That closer role for Duran being out. Now, Duran is out with a oblique injury, so hopefully that's not like, it's not an elbow injury. It's not an arm injury, not a shoulder, which is good, but you use your obliques. They're like your ribs. They're the muscles around there. So turning and those kind of quick jab movements that pitchers need, he's not going to be able, he's going to take some time to rest, and that could linger. But it's not an arm injury, so that's good. It's not season ending. And for Justin Topa, of course, the knee injury, it's not going to be super bad. When you look at Thielbar, he's got a hamstring injury. We'll see how long that lingers because he really didn't pitch in spring training at all. So we'll see kind of where things go with that. And if you just with this Twins bullpen, it's not big injuries. So hopefully in a month, everything's fine, but you need to figure out the closer spot. I think Griffin Jax is going to have a very, very good year for the Minnesota Twins. I think he'll probably take on not entirely the closer role. I think the Twins will go more closer by committee, probably, like they did Duran's rookie season, where it's like, yeah, we'll use like Griffin Jax is the Twins' most talented reliever. If you look at stuff, that's Griffin Jax. So if you look at that, Griffin Jax is not going to be used in the ninth inning every single time. Sometimes he'll be used in the seventh when there's 2 on and nobody out. Sometimes he'll be put in the eighth inning. Then sometimes the ninth. There is Brock Stewart, who was a very good pitcher and was very good for the Twins last year, but he barely pitched. And he had to battle injuries, and he missed most of the second half. He was great for the Twins in the playoffs, which gives you hope that as long as he can stay healthy, he'll be good. But the thing with Brock Stewart, he just never has been able to stay quite healthy. So that'll be it's why the Twins signed him last year as a free agent, because like he was just open, but he had a lot of talent, and you saw that talent, and he can still show that. But those guys, I think Jackson, Stewart, are going to take a lot of the ninth inning situations for Minnesota. You also have, of course, Okert, you have Funderburk as your 2 lefties. You have Jay Jackson. You have Daniel Duarte, who I think was with Cincinnati a year ago. He's got great stuff, but, walks a lot of guys. And if you're a reliever, you can't really allow base runners at all. So if you get his walk numbers to go down, he'd be a good reliever. But of course, you could say that about most relievers that aren't good, which is if they just fixed this, they'd be great. If they just struck out more people, they'd be great. If they just gave up fewer homers, they'd be great. If they just gave up less walks, they'd be great. It's easier said than done. But and there's a few other guys whose names are escaping me right now with the Twins bullpen. I don't have the piece of paper in front of me, but it's a unit that still should be effective, I think. And with the Twins starting rotation, even though DeSclafani is not going to provide them any depth, really, and the Twins don't have a ton of depth behind their 5 guys, those 5 guys are going to be really, really good. When you look at the Twins rotation, those guys are all going to be good. They're all going to be impactful. Nobody is like a few years ago where you go, oh, it's Chris Archer day. It's Dylan Bundy day. Can the Twins just not get shelled? Every pitcher is going to give the Twins an opportunity to pitch 5+ innings and put the Twins in a position to win the game. Every single pitcher that the Twins have. But if anybody gets hurt, that's where things get bleak. Looking on the lineup side of things, I think it all just kind of comes down to the top end talent. And they have such good top end talent. The thing that the Twins can avoid is, can they avoid strikeouts? The Twins struck out a lot last year. Now, in the second half of the season, the strikeouts went down slightly. They went from being one of the worst teams in the league to like bottom third. And then they were able to hit more for power, and they could do all this kind of stuff. I get all that. Apologies for the garage door opening up. If you can hear that in my house, I think my wife is leaving for the job to make us money because podcasting doesn't necessarily pay the bills. Anyway, but looking at this Twins team, when you look at the lineup side of things, they're a very high talented team. The one thing, who is going to regress? Because if you look at Julian, if you look at Wallner, and if you look at Lewis, all 3 of those rookies combined had, I think if you judge it an OPS plus, were the most effective, most productive rookie Twins trio in team history. And there's going to be some regression in that. Not everybody's going to have that exact same season. Which out of those 3 guys do I think will regress? I think everybody's kind of on the same page. It's going to be Wallner. Now, how bad is that regression? Because Lewis will regress. He's not going to get 50 RBIs in 58 games. He's not going to go on that pace. If he does, he's going to hit 60 home runs and drive in like 140. He's going to have 140 RBIs. That's a Hall of Famer. I don't think Royce Lewis is going to put those numbers up this season. But overall, I think if you look at the big regression candidate, if you're talking about which guy is going to regress and look the worst by all those three, it's going to be Matt Wallner, just because he's a guy he's a big swinger, high strikeout guy. He's essentially a young Joey Gallo. If you look at Joey Gallo early in his career, that's who Matt Wallner is. But when Matt Wallner struggles, he ends up looking like late-term Joey Gallo, who, like the Twins fans know last season, could hit the ball a mile, but was also hurt a little bit for the Twins, but also struck out a lot and didn't take at-bats and just swung at everything and missed. And that's the thing with Wallner. If Wallner can keep the walks up, keep the strike, he's going to strike out a lot, but can the strikeouts be lower, and can they be kind of kept to as low as they can be for Wallner? Can he keep it in the low 30s instead of the 40s for a strikeout rate? That'll be the thing for Wallner. Julian, I think, probably is the most consistent guy because he's just more of a pure contact hitter. Now, if Julian can develop power, he'll take his game to another level. And some people believe that, some people don't. I think Fangraphs does not project him to have that, but we'll see as the year goes on. I think Ed Julian's a nice player for this team. Overall, I think the one thing you can look at, the Twins do need some diversity in their lineup. And I think Carlos Santana and Ed Julian give you a little bit of that. And what I mean diversity in your lineup is you need a lot of guys who can hit home runs. That's just how baseball is. But you still can benefit from having some of those other guys sprinkled in your lineup who are more contact hitters, who can get on base so the next guy can rip a double or hit a home run. You need some of those guys in there. And I think guys like Ed Julian, guys like Manuel Margot hit like 4 home runs last year. And I know Michael A. Taylor hit 20 home runs a year ago, but I don't think Manuel Margot is going to have all of a sudden a breakout 20 homer season. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's going to be nice for diversity. I think with the Twins overall, I think they can steal more bases this year. I have an article up at Zone Coverage talking about how I think the Twins are going to steal more bases because Twins were one of the worst teams in baseball since Rocco Baldelli in stealing bases. They've stolen, I think, either the least or the second least amount of steals since Rocco Baldelli thing. I think Baldelli, he came from Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay likes to run the bases and steal and do all that. Like, it's more of a personnel issue for Baldelli than it is a philosophical issue about stealing. And now that you had a guy like Willie Castro last year who could come in and be a pinch runner or be a base stealing threat, he did use that, especially in the second half of the season, because the Twins got used to the rule play a lot more, and he stole a lot of bases. If Buxton is healthy, do you see him steal a lot of bases? Manuel Margot can steal a lot of bases and replace what Michael A. Taylor did stealing a year ago. Does Ed Julian steal a little bit more bases? Does Royce Lewis steal bases? If Brooks Lee comes up, I know not all those guys are burners, but they're young enough to at least have the threat of stealing bases. And that's where I think this Twins team could be fascinating. I'm not going to tell you last season, and they had the most stolen bases by far. So stealing bases doesn't equal winning, but being dead last in steals, that doesn't mean good things for your ball club. Can the Twins go from bottom of the third to closer to league average? If they can just do that, I think they'll be at a very, very nice spot. The one thing I want to talk about before we wrap up the podcast here for the day, I think Pablo Lopez has a really good chance this season to establish his narrative, to take, now that he has control of his narrative, to really establish, cement himself, if you will. It's the title of my article that I wrote for Zone Coverage. Pablo Lopez has a chance to cement himself in 2024 as an ace. He has a chance to put his Twins legacy on the line, because last year he had to fight to make sure his legacy wasn't going to be bad. He got traded for Luis Arraez. There was a lot of expectations when you get traded for a batting champion, and he jumped above all of them. Obviously he tinkered with the sweeper. That became a really effective pitch. He got to throw more velocity. He did all of these things and took himself from a very nice number 2 starter to an ace. And the guy was like second in the American League and third overall in baseball in total strikeouts last year. Had 234 strikeouts. That's Johan Santana level. The guy finished top 10 in Cy Young voting. And when you look at everything in the regular season, Pablo Lopez proved he was worth trading for Luis Urias. But then people said, I got to see it in the postseason. Okay, Pablo Lopez had 2 of the best Twins postseason starts I've seen in my life. That guy balled out. 7 innings against Toronto, 7 innings against the Astros, both, and obviously every playoff game is a must-win game. But Pablo Lopez, amazing. He pitched great. Then he proved he was a playoff ace, number 1 starter, unlike Barrios, unlike some of these other guys. I love Barrios, but unlike Barrios, Pablo Lopez proved he was better than Jose Barrios and at least has a higher ceiling. And even I think Barrios is talented. He's a great pitcher. No disrespect. I just think Pablo Lopez is better. And when you look at the things that he still had to do to get over the narrative, it still was there. There still were things he had to overcome because everybody treated Sonny Gray like he was an ace last year because he was and I get it, he was a more established name across baseball. Sonny Gray's a 10-year veteran. He's a 3-time All-Star. If you count this season, Pablo Lopez, by the way, made his first All-Star team this year. So when you look at that, some people still didn't give Pablo the credit because everybody wanted to moan about Sonny Gray leaving. And that's something I forgot to touch on early in the podcast. But Sonny Gray wasn't going to put up Sonny Gray numbers in 2024. The Sonny Gray in 2023 had an ERA under 3, only allowed 8 home runs all year and made 32 starts. Sonny Gray isn't going to put up that same production this year. You want to know how I know? He's already starting the year on the IL. And again, that's no disrespect to Sonny Gray. I wish he wasn't on the IL, but he got a 3-year, $75 million deal from the Cardinals. Even the Twins at a normal payroll weren't going to pay that because Sonny Gray wasn't going to put up those numbers. He's 34. Did the Twins want to be paying $25 million a year to 37-year-old Sonny Gray? No, thank you. That's not what I'm signing up for. I don't think Sonny Gray is going to be as good this season. Even if he pitched 32 times, he was not going to only allow 8 home runs, pitch. I think he got to 163 innings and have an ERA under 3. That's just not going to happen again this year. So Sonny Gray wasn't going to fill the production of Sonny Gray. Now, Pablo Lopez, I think, is going to fill that production because I think Pablo Lopez had an ERA of 3.66, but if you take out a bad stretch he had from, I'm going to say May to mid-June, if you take out maybe late April, if you take out kind of a month and a half stretch from Pablo Lopez, he looks amazing. And he's much closer in Cy Young voting. His ERA just never really allowed him to get there. Now, the thing with Lopez is he does give up the home runs. Not a ton. Barrios gives up more home runs than him. He's not gives up the most home runs in all of baseball, but does give up a decent amount of home runs as a pitcher. A lot of them came off the fastball. 11 home runs came off the fastball a year ago. That was the most for Pablo Lopez. 6 home runs came off of the changeup. And he threw the changeup about half as much as he threw the fastball. So that also is if you just look at per capita, that's also a very high, but his changeup's a great pitch. It's one of his most effective, not one of his most effective, but it kind of was his calling card when he got traded to the Twins before he developed the sweeper, before he got a little bit more on his fastball. But the changeup was a pitch that intrigued everybody. So, it's just more of whether it's placement, whether it's, not throwing it to certain hitters. I know everybody talks about the same-handed changeup. Pablo Lopez, a righty, throwing changeups to righties doesn't necessarily bode well for him. But anyway, that's the whole thing. I think Sonny Gray is a great pitcher. I just don't think Sonny Gray is going to fill that void. I don't think Sonny Gray would have filled the void that even he did last year for production. And the thing with Sonny Gray is he got terrible run support. Because if you look at his pitcher win-loss record, and pitcher win-loss records don't really mean much, but what they can tell you is that guy didn't get any run support. And Sonny Gray did not get run support in his starts. So even if the Twins have a guy who pitches worse than Sonny Gray and the Twins offense smoothens out, they end up winning probably the same amount of games during his starts. And that's it's a little bit convoluted, but that's where things sit. And for Pablo Lopez, I think he can be the guy who has an ERA of closer to 3 and under 3 than the 3.66 when the season's all said and done. He's Baseball America's pick to win the Cy Young. That's a good baseball publication that's picking Pablo Lopez to win the AL Cy Young this year. Pablo Lopez is a guy who can, now that he's overcome those barriers, and by the way, the Twins know that Pablo Lopez is better than Sonny Gray because he was the opening day starter last year over Sonny Gray. He was the game one starter over Sonny Gray in the postseason. And he, like, every time the rotation turned back around, Lopez was over Sonny Gray. And there was no contest in my mind, and in the Twins' mind either, that Pablo Lopez was going to be that number one pitcher. But to the fan base, he still has to jump that hurdle, and I think he can. And I think to most people now he has. And now that he has, or at least is in good position to jump that last hurdle, after that, he just gets to be the guy who everybody goes, do you remember Pablo Lopez when he pitched here? He's awesome. And Pablo Lopez is awesome. He's going to have another great start today, I hope. And it's really going to look bad if you listen to this podcast, like catching up tomorrow after opening day, and all of a sudden things don't look good. But the last couple things I want to end the podcast on: the Twins are projected to win the American League Central. I think Fangraphs has them at like 84 wins. They're always on the lower side of wins. They never predict like 102 win teams, really. So when I look at the projections for the Twins, last year they had 89 wins. I think 89 is like probably where Vegas has them, like 89 and a half, somewhere in there. I don't look it up. I don't bet, but it's roughly in that range. I think the low end for the Twins is 89 wins, 88 wins, like in those mid 80s for wins, high 80s for wins. I think the Twins finish somewhere between 89 and 94 wins. I think somewhere in that range, I think the Twins finish. Just because I still think there's some things here and there. Now, if the Twins play on the high end, if we talked about earlier, if all of those ifs happen, then yeah, the Twins are going to win 98 games. But I think realistically, some of those are going to happen. Some of those aren't going to happen. There's going to be a player who we don't think of is going to have a great year. There's going to be a player we don't think of that has a really bad year that we are counting on as Twins fans. So I think overall, I predict the Twins to win somewhere between 89 and 94 games. I think they're going to win the American League Central. I know they're going to win the American League Central because when you look at the teams, Kansas City, I know they made a lot of free agent moves. Let me put it to you this way for Kansas City. The Oakland Athletics were trying to build a team so bad that it created fan apathy to create the conditions for them to move the franchise. And for most of last season, the Royals were worse than them. And the Royals signed a bunch of 3 starters. Cool. They went from a 58-win team. Let's say that gets them 10 extra wins. They're a 68-win team. Bobby Witt Jr. is great. Vinny Pasquantino can be a nice player for them. Name me any other player that can be nice for Kansas City. They're not doing anything. The White Sox, they're the White Sox. I mean, like, it's fun to pick on them because nobody likes the White Sox, but you got to feel bad for them in the sense of they had a rebuild that just did not go well. They fired their GM, but they hired the second in command. So how much are things really going to change? And they traded Dylan Cease. They don't I can't tell you anybody on that pitching staff for Chicago. It's going to be bad for them. They're going to finish in last place. Them and the Royals are going to be in the basement. The Guardians always have the pitching to compete. And if they have the devil magic like they had in 2022, then they can compete. Never count Cleveland out. They always have the pitching to keep themselves relevant. It's their hitting. First-year manager Stephen Vogt. Let's see how that goes. I think he'll be a nice manager for them. But obviously, Tito Francona is a Hall of Famer. So how does that look different for the Guardians in 2024? The Tigers are the most boom or bust team because they have the high-end talent. When you look at Casey Mize, when you look at Skubal, when you look at some of the pieces that they have, you can see why there's people that want to buy into the Tigers. But they haven't done it yet. And until they've done it yet, I'm not going to buy into them. The Minnesota Twins have a better pitching staff than all of them. The Minnesota Twins have a better lineup than all of them. And I think that there's no reason if the Twins don't win the American League Central, we're going to look back on this at the end of 2024 and go, what the heck happened? So that's what I think for the Twins. Those are kind of all of my thoughts. I think if you look back on this and you go and you see them finish second or even third in the division like they did in 2022, you got to say something went horribly wrong for them, because there's no reason that the Twins shouldn't be the AL Central champions. I'm not saying that it's 100% guaranteed. I'm saying that they are the favorites and there's no reason why they shouldn't be the favorites, and they should take this division. And of course, it's easy to say that on opening day, but here we go. We got to start somewhere. So here we go. It's opening day. It's here. And there's one last little thing I want to leave you guys on. First of all, go follow Bombs Away on Twitter. Go follow Bombs Away on Facebook. Go follow Bombs Away on YouTube. I'm going to try and be more active throughout the season. I apologize for not being on here a ton in the offseason, having to spend a ton of this podcast just catching everybody up. But we're here. Let's do this thing. I'm going to try and post at least once a week, twice, depending on just kind of if a bunch of stuff is happening and if I have time to do it. Obviously, I still have some speech stuff for the coaching I'm doing for my old high school. I'm going to have some broadcast stuff pick up for my job. But I think overall, it's going to be fun. And one reason why I think it's going to be really fun is I have something that I'm going to tease. I don't know if I should announce it quite yet, but there's going to be something later on. I don't know if it's today. I don't know if it's later this week that I can fully announce. But there's going to be something fun this offseason that I'm going to be a part of and that I'm really, really excited to be a part of. So just keep an eye out for that when that happens. Keep an eye out for it because it'll be really, really fun. All right. That's going to do it. I don't want to make this podcast super long, even though it's already brushing up to an hour. But here we go. It's opening day. Listen to this at your pleasure as we get ready for the Twins to play the Royals on opening day. The Twins should win 2 out of 3. Here we go. If they can start the season with a sweep like they did a year ago, hot dog. Here we go. But I've said here we go a lot. But there's no other way to say it because let's just get this Twins season started. I'm CJ Baumgartner. You've been listening to Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. See you next time.